Welcome to the online platform of Zenith classes. The topic that we are going to study today is Shakespeare. Shakespeare is one of the most important topic of English literature that is studied from school level to graduation to post-graduation level. The most important topic of English literature, of British English literature, is we are going to delve with that today. Right, so before starting the works of Shakespeare and what were his dramas and his writings, the work, everything about Shakespeare would be dealt today in this class, right? So now let's come to the first slide. This is the basic background of Shakespeare as an author. Who was Shakespeare? When was he born? So, we are studying for KVS and NVS and PGT and TGT. The course here, the syllabus here is slightly different from UGC NET, where UGC NET is very extensive and elaborate and a lot of difficult questions, in-depth questions are asked over there. Here, whereas in these exams, very easy, or I will say normal questions are asked. For example, they'll ask who has written this particular book, who were the various characters in the book. So easy questions are asked in these NVS and KVS and PGT, TGT examination. So we are going to deal with the history of Shakespeare, then his plays, and then the other works and the stories, summaries of his various plays. So coming to the basic introduction of Shakespeare. See, Shakespeare was born in Shakespeare as an author was born in 1564 and he passed away in 1616. Right? He was baptized on 26th of April. And baptized, a child is baptized after 3 days of his birth. So we can assume that Shakespeare was born on 23rd of April. Right? And the year was 1564 and he passed away in 1616. Right? So this is the date of birth of Shakespeare, if anybody asks that in the exams. He was born in Stratford upon Avon. कहाँ पे पैदा हुए थे? In Avon, Stratford upon Avon. He was born there. It is a place in England. Right? That is why he is known as a Bard of Avon. B-A-R-D, Bard of Avon. He is known as the Bard of Avon. And who were the parents of William Shakespeare? They were John Shakespeare and Mary Arden. कौन थे इनके parents? John Shakespeare and Mary Arden were the parents. And he was married to this woman known as Anne Hathaway. Right? Then he had 3 children. One was Susanna and the twins Hamlet and Judith. Clear? So this was the basic introduction of Shakespeare, that Shakespeare was born in 1564 and he passed away in 1616. He was born in this place called known as Stratford upon Avon. That is why he was also known as the Bard of Avon. His parents were John and Mary. Then he was married to Anne of Hathaway. Then Ben Jonson, who was a contemporary of Shakespeare, he has said few lines about Shakespeare. And what were the few lines? Ben Jonson said that Ben Jonson is also there in our course. So Ben Jonson has written a lot of works such as Alchemist, then Walpole, and different works, important works that he has criticized a lot of authors. This Comedy of Humors is also written by this Ben Jonson, and he was a contemporary of Shakespeare. He wrote in the same age as Shakespeare was writing. He has said about Shakespeare, this is a quote and it can be asked in the exams also, that Shakespeare knew small Latin and less Greek. कि Shakespeare को क्या आता था? That he knew, उनको थोड़ी सी Latin आती थी and less Greek आती थी. And why did he say that? Because Shakespeare के जितने भी work थे, they were inspired by Greek and Latin, and he was writing about Italian society, Naples, Verona, and other places, right? So Athens, for example. So that is why Ben Jonson said that he knew small Latin and less Greek. Clear? So these lines are said by Ben Jonson. See, if you people keep a small notebook with you and write these important things, then you will retain them in your mind for a longer time. Although I would be providing you with the PPT and the notes, everything, but it's better if you write them with your own hands, then you can retain them. Clear? So Ben Jonson said this for Shakespeare, that he knew small Latin and less Greek. Now coming to the next slide, we have there's this Robert Greene, author Robert Greene. Just a second. Yes, there was this author. Yes, there was this author Robert Greene. He's a part of University of Wit. Now, what is University of Wit? University. See, these are small questions which can be asked. Although they are very easy, but still the level of the examinations that I have been talking about is not very high as compared to UGC NET. They are very easy, or their level of difficulty is like 50% of UGC NET. So they ask small questions that are easy, comparatively easier. So there were this writer Robert Greene, he is a member of University of Wit. Now, what is University of Wit? It had like 7 members who went to University of Cambridge and Oxford, and they were men of learning. So all these writers, such as this Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, then George Peele, John Lilly, all these were they were categorized into a group, and that group was known as University of Wit. So one of the University of Wit's writer was this Robert Greene, and this Robert Greene was not a very big admirer of Shakespeare as a writer. So he said that Shakespeare was an upstart crow who was beautified on their feather, that Shakespeare को कुछ ऐसा आता नहीं था. He was nothing. He was an upstart crow and he beautified on our feathers. जो भी कुछ हमने लिए, जो हमने कुछ works चलाए थे, on our works, by the understanding, by the readings of our work, he became famous. So he criticized this Robert Greene, who is a part of this University of Wits group. He criticized Shakespeare and called him an upstart crow. Clear? Now coming to Ben Jonson again. Now here Ben Jonson is praising Shakespeare. He was saying that Shakespeare was not of an age but for all ages, and it is one of the most famous quotes. So learn this quote and write this quote in your books, that Ben Jonson said for Shakespeare that Shakespeare was not of an age but of all times. कि Shakespeare किसी एक age के नहीं थे, he was of all ages. Why? Because his work was so versatile and it was read everywhere, कि वो सिर्फ एक age तक limited नहीं थे. His work was read in all the ages, so he was not of one age but of all ages. So it was said by Ben Jonson in the praise of Shakespeare. Now coming to the plays that he has written, Shakespeare has written 37 plays. 37 plays are written by Shakespeare. Then he has written 154 sonnets. Clear? 154 sonnets and 37 plays have been written by Shakespeare. He has written 2 long narrative poems, 37 plays, 154 sonnets that I am going to discuss later in the class. Then 2 narrative poems, long narrative poems are also written by him. Clear? So this is what Shakespeare has written in totality, and all these plays, rather the important plays such as Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, then your Midsummer's Night Dream, the important dramas that As You Like It, and all these important works will be dealt by us. Now first this reference of Shakespeare's play, जो पहली reference Shakespeare की कहीं किसी play में आई थी, that was in this work known as Palladi's Tamia, and this is a work which was written by a minor small author, Francis Mears. Francis Mears नाम का एक author था, उन्होंने एक work लिखा था Palladi's Tamia. In this work, for the very first time, the reference to Shakespeare in plays was given. तो पहली बार जो प्रेज मिला था शेक्सपियर के प्लेस को, या फिर जो उनका रेफरेंस पहली बार आया था, दैट वाज इन दिस प्ले नोन एज Palladi's Tamia, and it was written by Francis Mears. He was a minor author at that time. Right? Now Shakespeare, I haven't told you that Shakespeare was writing in the age of Renaissance, and Renaissance was the age of revival, or Renaissance means the age of revival of learning or knowledge. See, before Renaissance, let me just give you a little bit of background in the age which Shakespeare was writing, and then we'll move forward to the plays and the sonnets. शेक्सपियर वॉज राइटिंग इन द एज ऑफ क्वीन एलिजाबेथ. नाउ क्वीन एलिजाबेथ की एज कौन सी थी? इट वॉज फ्रॉम 1558 to 1603. She was the most powerful monarch of England, of Great Britain, as to say, because she defeated in 1558, when she became the Queen of England, she defeated Spanish Armada. In this year, Spanish Armada happened. Spanish Armada was the army of Spain, and it was considered invincible, undefeatable. But when she as a queen came to reign, when she started ruling England, that army of Spain was defeated under her rule. So she became this powerful monarch, and her time period is considered as one of the most powerful time period, and the literature, architect, and all the fields, they flourished in her time period. So Shakespeare was writing, as an author, was writing in her time period, and her time period is also known as the age of Renaissance. Now before her time period in England, there was this age which was going on, and that is known as Dark Age. Dark Age. In this age, a lot of wars were happening. For example, 100 years of war was happening in England, and England was fighting with France. And the time period of 100 years of war is 1338 to 1453. If somebody asks you, this is a part of history of English literature, and one should know such kind of important stuff, that 100 years of war was happening. 100 year of war. So ये जो dark ages चल रही थी before this Elizabethan age and before the age of Renaissance, here in dark ages, 100 years of why this age is known as dark ages, because here a lot of war was happening, and because of the war, people were indulged into those wars, and they were not writing any literature or any poetry, any drama, any fiction was not being written. So it is dark age for literature, because no literary work was taking place in this age. So 100 years of war happened, and it was the dark age, and nothing was new, no knowledge and no transfer of knowledge was happening. And this age is known as dark age. So after this dark age came Renaissance, or the revival of learning. And Renaissance in England, Renaissance first came in Italy in the 14th century, and then in the 15th century it came in England, and there was this writer Sir Thomas More. Sir Thomas More, who is also known as, he has written a famous work Utopia. So ये जो थे, he went to Italy, and he is also known as the father of humanism, this Sir Thomas More. So when he went to Italy, he brought these new ideas, new thoughts and new learnings to this place, England, and that is why he is also known as father of humanism. तो पहले क्या चल रहा था dark ages में या Renaissance से पहले, that God as an entity was the center of universe, and whatever we were writing, that was around God. God was the center, and everything was revolving around that. But in Renaissance, in the age of Shakespeare, when there was revival or rebirth of knowledge, humans as individuals became the center of universe, and everything started revolving around them. कि humans क्या थे, वो सेंटर बन गई, individuals, humanism आ गया, and सब चीज उनके आसपास घूमने लग गई, and ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक लिटरेचर केम इनटू एग्जिस्टेंस. तो वो किसकी एज थी? शेक्सपियर की एज थी. और उसको लेकर कौन आया था रेनेसां एज को? दैट इज सर थॉमस मोर, एंड ही वाज आल्सो नोन एज फादर ऑफ ह्यूमनिज्म. तो इस एज में शेक्सपियर क्या कर रहे थे? लिख रहे थे, जो कि रेनेसां इज द सेम एज एज द एज ऑफ क्वीन एलिजाबेथ. ठीक है, एलिजाबेथ मैंने आपको बता दिया, शी इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट फेमस मोनार्क. बेन जॉनसन भी इनकी एज में लिख रहे हैं, शेक्सपियर भी. यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ विट्स के बारे में हमने बात किया, रॉबर्ट ग्रीन हु इज अ पार्ट ऑफ यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ विट्स. एवरीबडी वाज राइटिंग इन अंडर हर एज, एंड इतने फेमस ड्रामाज एंड पोएट्री, एडमंड स्पेंसर, सिडनी, सब ने इनकी एज में लिखा है. एंड द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट एंड द मोस्ट रीड वर्दी वर्क हैज बीन रिटन अंडर हर एज. एंड शेक्सपियर भी क्या कर रहे थे? इनकी एज में ही लिख रहे थे. क्लियर? Now let's come to Robert Greene and the plays. Clear? So this was the background of the age of Shakespeare. ठीक है. Now Shakespeare has written 37 plays, 154 sonnets and 2 long narrative poems. And the first reference to Shakespearean plays that we come across in a work of Francis Mears, who wrote a work, Polaris Tamia, and in this work, first reference to Shakespearean play is found by us. Clear? Now coming to the next work. So coming to the next page, we have the folios that have been written after the death of Shakespeare. So let's see the folios. There were 4 folios. See now, what were folios? Folios were these combined books which contained all the works and all the writings and all the plays of Shakespeare. So the 4 folios which were published were: number 1, the first folio. It was published in the year 1623. Shakespeare, as we know, had already passed in the year 1616. And the first folio that contained all the works of Shakespeare was in the year 1623. And it was published by these 2 people known as Hemmings and Condell. One was Henry Condell and the other one was John Hemmings. So Hemmings and Condell were the 2 people who published the first folio of Shakespeare in the year 1623. Now this is the most important folio that is being asked in the examination. So even if you do not remember the second or the third or the fourth folio, just remember this folio because it is important. And second one is also important because there is an epitaph which has been written by Milton. Clear? So first folio by these 2 people. One is John Hemmings and the other one is Henry Condell. So इन 2 लोगों ने क्या किया था? फर्स्ट फोलियो को पब्लिश करवाया था. And this first folio also had a poem by Ben Jonson. Here it is not mentioned, so please note it down in your copies. Ben Jonson, right? So Ben Jonson's poem was also published in the folio. Clear? And it was dedicated to this William Herbert, who was the Earl of Pembroke, and Philip Herbert, who was the Earl of Montgomery. Right? So these were the 2 people to whom the first folio was dedicated. That is William Herbert and Philip Herbert, right? So first folio was published in 1623 by Condell and Hemming. It also had a poem by Ben Jonson and it was dedicated to 2 individuals. One is William Herbert and the other one is Philip Herbert. Clear? Now, one important fact that it had only 36 dramas. Shakespeare, as we know, has written 37 dramas, 37 plays. So one drama that was omitted, that was not written in this first folio, that was not published in this first folio was Persiles. ठीक है, तो इस एक ड्रामा या फिर प्ले को क्या किया गया था? ओमिट किया गया था, ये इसमें नहीं था. Clear? Now let's come to the next page and the next folio that we have. Next folio was issued in 1623. कौन से ईयर में हुआ था? 1623 में. Let me just rub it once. तो फर्स्ट फोलियो हमें पता है कौन से ईयर में हुआ था, दैट वाज इन 1623. ठीक है, एंड द नेक्स्ट और द सेकंड फोलियो वाज पब्लिश्ड इन 1632. ठीक है, ऑपोजिट है. ठीक है. नाउ मिल्टन हैड written a epitaph. Now what are epitaphs? Epitaphs are basically when you write something on somebody's death. That are epitaphs. So Milton had written an epitaph on Shakespeare and that epitaph has been published in the second folio. तो ये important चीज़ है. Epitaphs क्या होता है? Epitaphs are something that you write on death of somebody. तो मिल्टन ने जो एपिटाफ लिखा था फॉर शेक्सपियर, उनकी डेथ पे जो कुछ लाइंस लिखी थी मिल्टन ने शेक्सपियर की डेथ पे, तो वो लाइंस कहाँ पब्लिश हुई? वो लाइंस पब्लिश हुई इन सेकेंड फोलियो. एंड नाउ सेकेंड फोलियो वाज इशूड इन द ईयर 1632. क्लियर? Now third folio came in the year 1663 and the fourth folio or the last folio in 1685. So there were 4 folios. Number 1 was in the year 1623, then 1632, then 1663 and 1685. The important ones are the first one and the second one. Now let's come to the next page. Right? Yes. Now let's look at the narrative poems that have been written by Shakespeare. Number 1 is Venus and Adonis. Venus and Adonis एक poem है जो कि इन्होंने लिखी है. It is written by Shakespeare. वीनस क्या है एंड एडोनिस क्या है? तो वीनस इज द गॉडेस ऑफ लव. किसकी गॉडेस है? लव की गॉडेस है. एंड द इंटायर पोएम इज हर seduction of this person known as Adonis. So Venus and Adonis is a narrative poem which is written by Shakespeare, and in this narrative poem we see Venus. She is the goddess of love and she is seducing, she is trying to win the love of this person, this man Adonis. इसके प्यार को क्या करना चाह रही है? जीतना चाह रही है. एंड इट इज ट्राइंग टू शो हर अनरेक्यूटेड लव. एक तरफा जो प्यार होता है ना, जो आप हासिल नहीं कर सकते, उसके बारे में ये कहानी है, वीनस एंड एडोनिस, राइट. एंड नाउ इट हैज गॉट 6 लाइन स्टैंजाज, जिसको हम सेस्टारेमा बोलते हैं. कितने स्टैंजाज हैं इसमें? मतलब जो स्टैंजाज की लाइन है वो काफी सारे स्टैंजाज हैं इस पोएम में. तो हर एक स्टैंजा जो है वो 6 लाइन्स में बना है. 1 2 3 4 5 एंड 6 लाइन. एंड इस फॉर्म को क्या कहते हैं? व्हेन स्टैंजाज आर इन 6 लाइन, दैट फॉर्म इज नोन एज सेस्टारेमा. क्या बोलते हैं उसको? सेस्टारेमा. सी आई हैव रिटन इट समवेयर. सेस्टारेमा, यस, रिटन इन सेस्टारेमा. 6 लाइन का स्टैंजा है इसमें, सेस्टारेमा हम उसको बोलते हैं. एंड इन सेस्टारेमा वी हैव अ क्वाड्रेंट एंड अ कपलेट. तो 4 लाइनें एक होती हैं एंड 2 लाइनें एंड में क्या करती हैं? राइम करती हैं. तो दैट इज सेस्टारेमा एंड इट इज रिटन इन अ क्वाड्रेंट एंड अ कपलेट. क्वाड्रेंट एंड फॉलोड बाय अ कपलेट, कि 4 1 और 2 1. ठीक है, तो ये सेस्टारेमा है. और ये पोएम जो है वीनस और एडोनिस, इट इज रिटन इन दिस फॉर्मेट. ओविडियन पोएम है, दैट इज इट हैज बीन इंस्पायर्ड बाय ओविड. ओविड इज अ एंशिएंट राइटर. And this writer Shakespeare has taken references from Ovid when he was writing this work, Venus and Adonis. Ovidian poem है ये. तो ये चीज़ें ध्यान रखिए क्योंकि एग्जाम में यही चीज़ें पूछी जाती हैं कि कौन सी पोएम है. तो Ovidian poem है. It has been inspired by Ovid. सेस्टारेमा में लिखी गई है. सेस्टारेमा means quatraint and this couplet. 6 line stanzas are there. Published in the year 1593. कौन सा ईयर है? 1593. एंड इट इज डेडिकेटेड टू हेनरी वॉट्सले, दैट इज अर्ल ऑफ साउथहैम्पटन. जो है वॉट्सले के लिए क्या करी गई है? डेडिकेटेड है. हु इज द अर्ल ऑफ साउथहैम्पटन, राइट. एंड दिस अर्ल ऑफ साउथहैम्पटन वाज आल्सो द पेट्रन ऑफ शेक्सपियर. ये क्वेश्चन आ सकता है कि शेक्सपियर का पेट्रन कौन था? Patron were basically these courtiers who used to adopt artists and they used to pay them money so that they could keep on writing, because artists or these poets and writers, they did not have any secondary source of income. So these patrons, these lords, these lords, all of Southampton, patron. तो ये जो पेट्रन होते थे, दे यूज टू अडॉप्ट आर्टिस्ट एंड दे यूज टू प्रोवाइड देम विद मनी सो दैट दे कुड कीप राइटिंग. एंड दिस एक्ट ऑफ पेट्रनशिप जो था वो किसने इंट्रोड्यूस किया था? इट वॉज इंट्रोड्यूस बाय क्वीन एलिजाबेथ एंड शी वॉज द पेट्रन ऑफ क्रिस्टोफर मार्लो हु हैज रिटन डॉक्टर फॉस्टर्स. ठीक है, किसने इंट्रोड्यूस किया है एक्ट ऑफ पेट्रनशिप? इट हैज बीन इंट्रोड्यूस्ड बाय दिस क्वीन एलिजाबेथ एंड दिस अर्ल ऑफ साउथहैम्पटन वाज द पेट्रन ऑफ शेक्सपियर. तो ये चीज लिख लेना बिकॉज इट इज नॉट मेंशन्ड हियर that Earl of Southampton was the patron of Shakespeare. Clear? Then we know that Venus and Adonis, Venus is the goddess of love and Adonis is the youth that she is trying to seduce, that she wants to fall in love with, but he is not falling in love with this Venus, the goddess, right? And now Spencer's Astrophil and Lodge Metamorphosis also use the same sesterema type of writing, that is 6 line stanzas, but that is not important here. Let's just stick to Venus and Adonis. Then the next poem that we have is the Rape of Lucrece. Rape of Lucrece. It is written in Rime Royal. Rape of Lucrece is written in Rime Royal. Now what is Rime Royal? Let me just explain it to you. What is Rime Royal? Rime Royal was invented, it is a form of writing just like Sesterema. It was invented by Chaucer. किसने इन्वेंट किया था Rime Royal? Chaucer ने इन्वेंट करा था. we consider Chaucer as the first English writer. So Chaucer invented Rhymer Royale, and it was used by King James I of Scotland for writing. When he wrote King's Squire, King James I of Scotland, किंग जेम्स वन जो थे स्कॉटलैंड के, उन्होंने लिखा था किंग स्क्वायर, एंड ही यूज्ड दिस type of writing that is known as Rhymer Royale, which was invented by Chaucer, and because of being used by a king, it is known as Rhymer Royale because it was used by a king. So when he was writing Rape of Lucretia, Shakespeare, he used this form of writing, that is Rhymer Royale. और Rhymer Royale में क्या होता है? There is a rhyming scheme which goes like this: A B and B C C. This is the rhyming scheme that is being followed in Rhymer Royale. Clear? It is dedicated to Henry Wriothesley, which is the Earl of Southampton. इनको करा है ये dedicate, same as Venus and Adonis. Both the works have been dedicated to him because he was the patron of Shakespeare. Now let's come to the next stanza. Next slide rather. Yes. The Passionate Pilgrims. We'll talk about Passionate Pilgrims. So what is happening in Passionate Pilgrims? See, Shakespeare has written 157 sonnets. So out of those sonnets, the two sonnets which were written by him in the end, those two sonnets were published here in this work, The Passionate Pilgrims. The last sonnets, which are known as Greek sonnets, the last two sonnets of Shakespeare, the Greek sonnets, both these sonnets are published in this work, The Passionate Pilgrims, and it was published by William Jagard. This was the person who published it, and the last two sonnets of Shakespeare were published in this work, which is known as Passionate Pilgrims, right? Now coming to another work, that is Phoenix and the Turtle. It's an allegorical elegy. Elegy is basically when you romanticize somebody's death, when you make it grandeur death. किसी की death को आप क्या करते हो? Romanticize करते हो. That is known as an elegy. So ये Phoenix, the Phoenix and the Turtle is that. ये elegy है, and it is attributed. That it is a tribute to Shakespeare. तो कोई पूछ ले what is the Phoenix and the Turtle? Then it is an allegorical elegy. It is written to romanticize Shakespeare. तो ये किसके लिए लिखी गई है? Shakespeare के लिए लिखी गई है. It is an elegy and it is written in 1601. It was published in this year, right? So this was it. Let me just rub it. The Passionate Pilgrims, I have told you, last two sonnets of Shakespeare were published here by William Jagard. Then Phoenix and Turtle is an allegorical elegy which is attributed, or which is a tribute to Shakespeare, if somebody asks you that. Coming to the next one. Now let's come to the sonnets of Shakespeare. Now sonnets are very important, and sonnets are studied, and Shakespearean sonnets are very important because he has written a plethora of sonnets. Like there are endless sonnets that he has written. And now first going to the sonnets that are written by Shakespeare, let's quickly understand what are sonnets. What is the form of writing a sonnet? So sonnet, let's just have a brief introduction of Shakespearean sonnets. Shakespearean sonnets were printed by this person known as Thomas Trollope, जिसको हम क्या बोलते हैं? We also say TT. Thomas Trollope. This is the person, right? Let's come here first. So Shakespearean sonnets are published by this person known as TT, that we known as Thomas Trollope. So he is the one who published Shakespearean sonnet. Shakespeare has written a lot of sonnets, right? So he has written 154 sonnets. How many? 154 sonnets in totality. Right? Out of which 1 to 126 sonnets are known as youth sonnets. The next 127 to 152 are known as the dark lady sonnets. And the last two, I've already told you, the Greek sonnets are published in the work known as the Passionate Pilgrimage that we have already done. So that are 153 and 154 sonnet. So these sonnets are important. These are also known as the twin or the couplet sonnets, the Cupid sonnets. So these sonnets 127 to 152 are known as Dark Lady sonnets, and this line has been repeated again. It was a technical thing, I think. By mistake it happened again. So let me just cut one of them. I have written it twice. I'm so sorry for the error. Yes. So fair sonnet, fair youth sonnet 1 to 126 are the fair youth sonnet, and the other one 127 to 152 are dark lady sonnets. So now we assume that these that 1 to 126 sonnets have been dedicated to William Herbert. William Herbert किसको dedicate किए हैं इन्होंने? William Herbert को, who is the Earl of Pembroke. We are assuming, we are not sure, he has dedicated these sonnets 1 to 126 to certain WH. इन्होंने अपने वर्क में बस ये लिखा है WH. So we assume that it was William Herbert who was the Earl of Pembroke, or it could be William Wordsworth who is the Earl of Southampton, who is also the patron of Shakespeare, but we are not sure who this WH is. But he has dedicated these sonnets, that is 1 to 126, that is also known as fair youth sonnet, to somebody WH, and that WH could be either William Herbert or William Wordsworth, right? And now the other sonnets, that is 127 to 152, that are either dedicated to this lady called Mary Filton or Lucy, who was a great courtesan or a prostitute at that point of time. It could either be her or Mary Filton. So these two ladies can be the choice of this dark lady that Shakespeare is talking about. So this is understood. Now coming to the next page again. Yes. Something just happened to my screen. Yes. This we have done. So Mary Filton could be either the dark lady could be Mary Filton, or it could be Lucy. And this Lucy is was a courtesan or a prostitute at that point of time in England. Right? So these sonnets we are done with these sonnets. Now let's come to the next page. Yes, this whole sonnet thing also includes a poem. This entire volume of sonnets also includes a poem which is known as the Lover's Complaint. क्या नाम है उस poem का? It is also known as the Lover's Complaint. So it is also a part of this sonnets, where he has written his sonnets. There is also a poem which is a part of that, that is known as a Lover's Complaint, right? So this is done. There is nothing that is much important. Yes, there is a statement by Dryden that Dryden says about Shakespeare. Dryden is praising Shakespeare, and he's saying that he was the man who all of modern and perhaps ancient poet had the largest and the most comprehensive soul. It is said by Dryden for Shakespeare, and it is one of the most famous line of literature. What does Dryden says? Let me just repeat it once more. He was the man who was of all modern and perhaps the ancient poet had the largest and the most comprehensive soul. कि जितने भी modern और ancient poets थे उनमें सबसे ज़्यादा क्या था? Comprehensive अगर किसी का soul था, that was of Shakespeare, and it is said by Dryden. So this was the gist, the background of Shakespeare and the age where Shakespeare was writing. Now let's come to the plays that he has written. He has written 37 plays, and obviously we cannot study all the plays. So we are going to study the summary, or I will give the summary of the important plays from which the questions are repeatedly asked. Right, so 37, I have written the name of all the 37 plays. We are just going to read that once, and then we'll go to the important plays that are there. Yes, let's come to the next one. Yes, So the number one, this is in the chronological order. So the first play, as we see, written by Shakespeare out of all the 37 plays, is Henry. Yes, your Henry VI Part 1. Then we have Henry VI Part 2, Henry VI Part 3, then Richard III, then Comedy of Errors, that's Titus and Andronicus, then the Taming of the Shrew, then the Two Gentlemen of Verona. This one is important. This has been taught in the masters and the UGC level. So this one is important. Then we have Love, Labour, Lost. Love, Labour, Lost. Then Romeo and Juliet. See, Romeo and Juliet is also important. We have Montague family and Montague family and the Capulet family that we have, and the love between Romeo and Juliet. ये मैं आज आपको पढ़ाऊंगी क्लास में. Then we have Richard II, Midsummer's Night Dream. This is also very important. Master's level में, if you do English literature from a reputed university or a college, then you will obviously find this work in the syllabus. It is that important. Then King John, the Merchant of Venice, is read everywhere. It is even there in the schools. So Merchant of Venice is there, important one. Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2. Let's come to the other page. Yes, then we have Much Ado About Nothing. This is one of the problem plays by Shakespeare. Problem play hai ye. Problem play by Shakespeare, right? Then we have Henry V, then Julius Caesar, another important play. We study it in 10th class CBSE board. Then As You Like It, important one. Graduation level, if you're doing in English honors, you'll find it. Then 12th Night, you'll find it in graduation and masters also. Hamlet, important one. Troilus and Cressida. Then All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, and Othello. Now let's come to the another one. Love, Labour, Lost, Romeo and Juliet. We have done this page. Much Ado About Nothing, we have already done this page. Then King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra are important. ये तीनों important है. Then Timon and Nathan's, Basilisk, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale important. The Tempest important. Two Noble Kinsmen, Henry VIII. So this was it. These were all the plays that Shakespeare wrote in his time period, and there are 37 in number. Right? See, when I forgot to explain this thing, when I was explaining sonnets to you, I did not explain what sonnets are. Sonnets क्या होते हैं? अब पहली बात मैंने आपको बताया नहीं, मैंने सिर्फ आपको ये बता दिया that he has written 154 sonnets, but I did not explain what sonnets are. तो sonnets क्या होते हैं? They are 14 line poems. क्या है sonnets? 14 लाइन की poems होती हैं. They are 14 line poems. 14 lines की poems होती हैं, which are written in iambic pentameter. किस में लिखी जाती हैं? Iambic pentameter में. These are 14 line poems. And they were initially wrote in Italy, and Petrarch was this one person. Petrarch wrote sonnets for his beloved Laura. इनकी एक lover थी Laura, and for her he used to write sonnets. Laura. Clear? So he was writing sonnets for Laura. Then there were these two people. One was Sir Thomas Wyatt. And Earl of Surrey. Henry Howard. So there were these two people. They were from England, and Petrarch was writing in Italy. So these two people, they went to Italy, and there they found writings of Petrarch and how beautiful they were. So these two, they brought sonnets to England. So if somebody asks you this question in examination, and it is often asked that who were the two individuals that brought sonnet to England. So sonnet that were 14 line poems were brought by this person. One was Sir Thomas Wyatt and the other one was Earl of Surrey. And what was the real name of Earl of Surrey? Henry Howard. So these two people brought sonnets from Italy. Now, what was the form of writing sonnets? So, sonnets were written in 2 stanzas, and first stanza used to have 8 lines and the second one used to have 6 lines. तो 8 और 6 के कॉम्बिनेशन में लिखे जाते थे सॉनेट्स. एंड ये फॉर्मेट कौन यूज करता था? पेट्रार्क यूज करता था. मिल्टन ने जो सॉनेट्स लिखे हैं, मिल्टन इज ऑल्सो यूजिंग द सेम फॉर्मेट. देन स्पेंसर हैज रिटन सॉनेट्स, ही ऑल्सो यूज द सेम फॉर्मेट, दैट इज योर दिस 8 lines and 6 lines. Clear? But when Shakespeare started writing sonnets, he changed the format, although it had already been changed by Henry Howard. इन्होंने क्या किया? He made it into 4, 4, 4 and 2. So quatrain, 3 quatrains and a couplet. तो Henry Howard ने ये use किया, whereas Sir Thomas Wyatt used the original format, and the original format of sonnet writing was 6 and 8. 8 lines and 6 lines, total 14 lines. But Earl of Surrey ने क्या किया? He made 4, 4, 4 and 2 quatrains, 3 quatrains and a couplet. So this format of Earl of Surrey was used by Shakespeare. Shakespeare was not using the traditional method that was invented by Petrarch in writing sonnets. He was using Earl of Surrey's format, that is quatrain, 3 quatrains and a couplet. 3 4 वाले और एक end में couplet. So this was the format of Shakespearean sonnets. I hope the sonnets are clear to you. Now let's come to the plays. See, now we have seen what sonnets were and the plays that were written by Shakespeare, which were 37 in number. Now let's come to the explanation of the plays that he had written. So see, the important ones I will be going to give the summary, and the less important works I am just going to give a little bit of gist. So King Richard III is a historical tragedy. हमें क्या याद रखना है? That it is a historical tragedy. क्या है? Historical tragedy है, ठीक है? King Richard III is a historical tragedy, and the source of it is the Chronicles of Holinshed. क्या है इसकी सोर्स? क्या है इसकी? ये कहाँ से, जो रेफरेंस है शेक्सपियर ने कहाँ से लिखी है? The reference has been taken by the Chronicle of Holinshed. See, the Roman plays that Shakespeare wrote, for example, Antony and Cleopatra or Julius Caesar, the reference have been taken from Plutarch's Life. But if you talk about the British play, that whether it's Henry or Richard or any other play that he has written, the references of most of them is taken from the Chronicles of Holinshed. Clear? So the reference of this one is also from Chronicles of Holinshed, and it's a historical tragedy, and material has also been, references have also been taken from Virgil's Angelica Historia. Virgil का एक work है Angelica Historia, so the references have also been taken from this work of Virgil. And Sir Thomas More का भी एक work है. Sir Thomas More मैंने आपको बताया था, the one who brought Renaissance into England, and he is also known as the father of humanism, जिन्होंने Utopia भी लिखी है. So this Sir Thomas More has written a work, The History of the King Richard III. तो यहाँ से भी शेक्सपियर ने क्या किया है? रेफरेंस ली है. So the 3 places where Shakespeare has taken references for this work is the Chronicles of Holinshed, Angelica Historia, which is written by Virgil, and the other one is a work by Thomas More, The History of the King Richard III. Right? So these were the references of this work. Now let's come to the next page. The earliest tragedy, let's come to Titus and Andronicus. The first tragedy, it is one of the earliest tragedy that Shakespeare has written. Tragedy है ये भी, और इसका कहना है, मतलब there is this viewpoint or there are these theories that it has got lot of bloodshed. मतलब इतना ज़्यादा bloodshed है कि there was this girl whose hands were chopped off and her tongue was also chopped off. So बड़ा bloodshed है इस play में, and it is assumed that it was written by Marlowe instead of Shakespeare. Shakespeare ने शायद इसका सिर्फ preface लिखा था, and in reality it was written by Marlowe. So there are various theories and interpretation, but हमने literature में पढ़ा है that it comes under the works of Shakespeare. So we are going to study that. We are not going to trust or assume theories that have been given, because theories they come and go. सो ये किसने लिखा है वर्क? इट हैज बीन रिटन बाय शेक्सपियर। ये भी एक ट्रेजेडी है। और कहाँ इसकी सोर्स है? हिक्यूबा ऑफ यूरिपिडीज। यूरिपिडीज कौन है? ही वॉज अ ग्रीक राइटर और ऑथर। उनका एक वर्क है हिक्यूबा, तो वहां से इसकी रेफरेंस ली गई है। तो टीटस एंड एंड्रोनिकस, इसकी जो इंटरप्रिटेशन है वो कहाँ से ली गई है? यूरिपिडीज का एक वर्क है हिक्यूबा, वहां से ली गई है। राइट, क्लियर? एंड सम रेफरेंसेस हैव आल्सो बीन टेकन फ्रॉम सेनेका और ओविड एंड पोल्ट्राक, यहाँ से भी रेफरेंसेस ली गई हैं। ओविड तो मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया है, ही हैज रिटन अ बुक वीनस एंड एडोनिस, जो मैंने आपको पोएम बताई थी, द नैरेटिव पोएम बाय शेक्सपियर, वो भी ओविड से है। ओविड की रेफरेंस है उस पोएम में भी। तो सेनेका ये बहुत ज़्यादा ब्लड शेड वाली ट्रेजेडीज लिखते थे, तो ही वॉज द मास्टर ऑफ ब्लड शेड ट्रेजेडीज। सो रेफरेंसेज आर फ्रॉम सेनेका, ओविड एंड पोल्ट्राक लाइफ, जो मैंने अभी आपको बताया है। Right, so this much is sufficient for this book, and if you want to read the summary you can. Clear? But I don't feel the summary is that important of this book, because this play is not that important according to me, and questions, I don't find a lot of questions being asked from this work. So let's rather study the important one. Let's come to Romeo and Juliet, one of the most important works, and it is there in graduation also. So let's study Romeo and Juliet. अब ये based किसके ऊपर है? The book Romeo and Juliet is based on Arthur Brooks की एक work है, The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet. ये इनका एक वर्क था आर्थर ब्रूक का, द ट्रेजिकल हिस्टोरी ऑफ रोमियस एंड जूलियट. सो दिस वर्क ऑफ शेक्सपियर इज बेस्ड ऑन दिस वर्क बाय आर्थर ब्रूक. ठीक है, इन लोगों के ऊपर बेस्ड है, एंड इट वाज द फर्स्ट रोमांटिक ट्रेजेडी दैट वाज रिटन बाय शेक्सपियर. रोमांटिक ट्रेजेडी थी बिकॉज इट वाज there was love between the two protagonists, Romeo and Juliet, and there was this tragedy also when both of them die in the end. So it is a romantic tragedy. Clear? इसमें कोरस है. एग्जाम में बहुत बारी क्वेश्चन पूछ लेते हैं, वो 4 ऑप्शन दे देंगे, and then they will ask you which of the following plays or the drama has chorus in it. तो कोरस होता है ना, स्टार्टिंग में गाने वाली जो चीज़ें होती हैं, दैट इज कोरस. की स्टार्टिंग में गाना गा दिया और एंड में गाना गा दिया. तो कोरस कैन बी इन द स्टार्टिंग ऑल्सो और इन द एंड ऑल्सो. तो अ लॉट ऑफ प्ले बाय शेक्सपियर हैव कोरस इन देम इन द स्टार्टिंग. सो कोरस है इसमें, एंड इट इज रिटन इन 5 acts. ये भी चीज़ें पूछ लेते हैं, ऑल्दो इट्स अ वेरी पिटी थिंग टू आस्क, छोटी सी चीज़ है, पर इट इज रिटन इन 5 acts. इट इज अ ट्रेजिक रोमांटिक ट्रेजेडी. क्या है? रोमांटिक ट्रेजेडी है, इंस्पायर्ड बाय आर्थर ब्रूक. अब इसकी स्टोरी समरी जान लेते हैं. व्हाट इज द समरी ऑफ इट? See, basically what is happening in this play is there are 2 families. One is Montagues, एक Montagues and the other one is Capulets. So these are the 2 families, and there is this long rivalry that is going between these 2 families. इन families में क्या है? बहुत लंबी लड़ाई चल रही है. किसमें? Montagues and Capulets में. And there is this prince also. Let me just point out to you so that you people can understand. Yes, there is this prince Aeschylus. और ये सेटिंग कहाँ है इस प्ले की? वेरोना में सेटिंग है. द प्ले इज सेट इन वेरोना. वेरोना इज इन इटली. सो द प्ले इज सेट देयर. देयर आर 2 मेजर फैमिलीज. वन इज Montagues एंड द अदर वन इज Capulet. तो जो रोमियो है, रोमियो इज अ Montague. रोमियो के फादर जो है वो Montague हैं, तो रोमियो इज अ Montague, एंड जूलियट जो है वो है Capulet. So there is this long age rivalry which is going between these 2 families, and Aeschylus is the prince of Verona, right? Then there is Paris. Paris एक नाम का बंदा है. So Paris is what do we call him? Like he's this big nobleman or kinsman who is in the court of the emperor or the prince. तो ये courtier है, एक kinsman है. He's there in the court of the prince. And this Paris wants to marry Juliet, and Juliet is only 13 years old. कितने साल की है? 13 साल की है. जूलियट कितने साल की है? 13 साल की है. जूलियट कितने साल की है? 13 years. तो in the starting we see that this Paris come and ask Juliet's hand in marriage from this Capulet, but he denies, saying that Juliet is still 13 years old and she is too young to get married. तो इसकी शादी के लिए क्या कर देते हैं, डिनाई कर देते हैं, बोलते हैं let's wait for few more years and then we'll get her married to you. So this Paris, who is also the kingsman of the prince, is he wants to get married to Juliet. Now what happens, there is this rivalry as I have already told you. तो इस Juliet की there is this cousin which is known as Rosalind, yes, and ये क्या है, niece है Lord Capulet की. ये जूलियट की क्या है, फर्स्ट कजन है. एंड रोमियो, इन द स्टार्टिंग वी फाइंड दैट रोमियो इज इन लव विद दिस रोजलिन. रोमियो किससे प्यार करते हैं, रोजलिन से प्यार करते हैं इन द स्टार्टिंग ऑफ द प्ले. सो व्हाट हैपेंस, इनके घर पे, कैपुलेट्स के घर में, देयर इज दिस पार्टी विच इज गोइंग टू हैपन, अ बिग फीस्ट विच इज गोइंग टू हैपन. एंड रोजलिन, बीइंग द cousin of Juliet and the niece of Lord Capulet, will also be there. So in order to meet her and see her there, this Romeo crashes the party of Capulets. Although Capulets इनके दुश्मन हैं, but just in order to meet Rosalind there and to see her and to woo her, what he does, Romeo दुश्मनी के बावजूद भी क्या करते हैं, ये वहाँ जाते हैं पार्टी में and he crashes the party. वहाँ जाके Rosalind से मिलना चाहते हैं. But as soon as he sees Juliet in the party, he forgets about Rosalind and falls in love with Juliet. इनको Juliet से प्यार हो जाता है, right? तो जूलियट कैपुलेट, शी इज द डॉटर ऑफ कैपुलेट, एंड इनको जूलियट से प्यार हो जाता है एंड ही फॉरगेट्स अबाउट जूलियट. एंड जूलियट, व्हेन शी सीज रोमियो, शी आल्सो गेट अट्रैक्टेड टुवर्ड्स हिम एंड शी आल्सो फॉल्स इन लव विद दिस रोमियो. तो रोमियो और जूलियट दोनों को क्या हो जाता है, पार्टी में प्यार हो जाता है. एंड देन दे एक्सचेंज पोएम्स. रोमियो खूब सारी पोएम्स सुनाता है इसको एंड ही ट्राइज टू वू हर, एंड ये वू हो भी जाती है एंड दे फॉल इन लव विद ईच अदर. तो दिस हैपेंस एंड ये रोजलिन को भूल जाते हैं. So what happens next? Now this person, Romeo has a friend known as Mercutio. Romeo का friend है ये Mercutio. Romeo का friend है Mercutio. And ये Fair Lawrence जो आप देख रहे हैं, he is also Romeo's friend. Romeo का friend है, ठीक है. तो both of them, these Fair Lawrence and Mercutio, both of them are friends of this Romeo. And Tybalt is the cousin of Juliet. Juliet का क्या है, cousin है ये. Juliet का cousin है and Fair Lawrence and this Mercutio are this friends with Romeo. तो ये क्या करते हैं, next day what happens when they are done with the party and both of them fall in love. So this Romeo, he goes to this Fair Lawrence and he tells them that I have fallen in love with Juliet and I want to marry her and she is also ready to get married to me. And this is what and they both are 13 years old. And he says this to Fair Lawrence that Juliet wants to marry me and I also want to marry her. Which Fair Lawrence finds very weird because 5 days back he was crying for Rosalind and he wanted to marry her. But then he thinks that if Romeo and Juliet get married, then the long age rivalry which was going between these two families, that is Montagues and Capulets, can vanish if they both get married. So he agrees to the marriage. Clear? But meanwhile, what happens? This Tybalt, who is the cousin of Juliet, he calls Romeo for a fight, for a duel. So what used to happen in the olden days in Verona, in Athens and in these kind of places, कि लोग एक दूसरे को डुएल के लिए क्या करते थे, मैच के लिए, लड़ाई के लिए इनवाइट करते थे और या फिर प्रोवोक करते थे. तो दिस Tybalt, who was the cousin of Juliet, he provoked this Romeo for a fight. But Romeo, as he was in love with Juliet, he did not wanted to fight with the cousin. So he avoids the fighting with this person, with Tybalt. But instead of Romeo, Mauricio, who was the friend of, as I have told you, Romeo, goes for a fight with Tybalt, and Tybalt injures this Mauricio. And on hearing that, Romeo gets very upset and he does what? He starts fighting with Tybalt and kills Tybalt. So Tybalt dies, and it is by mistake, and because he was provoked. Romeo was provoked, as when Mauricio was fighting with Tybalt instead of Romeo. So this Mauricio, Romeo's friend, he gets injured and Romeo is not happy with the fact and he kills Tybalt. And what happens after Tybalt's death, that the prince who was here, the Aeschylus prince, he banishes Romeo from the स्टेट दैट इज वेरोना, वेरोना से क्या कर देते हैं, इनको बैनिश कर देते हैं, एंड टेल्स हिम टू गो आउट ऑफ वेरोना, कि अब आप वेरोना में नहीं रह सकते बिकॉज यू हैव किल्ड दिस टाइबाल्ड हु इज द who is a member of Capulet family and the brother or the cousin of Juliet. तो इनको ये निकाल देता है. And upon hearing this, Juliet also gets very upset and she thinks कि कोई ना कोई तो ऐसा reason रहा होगा why Romeo had to take the step and he had to kill Tybalt. It was not necessary that Romeo was entirely at fault. It could be Tybalt also. Tybalt faults also. So right, so Juliet was siding with this person, Romeo, but her family, they were against their marriage and everything, and they wanted her to get married to Paris. So what they do, they fix her marriage, Juliet's marriage with Paris, and they want her to get married to Paris in the coming 3 days. And when this Romeo is banished, he goes to a place known as Montague is the family, Mantua. He goes to a place Mantua. When this person Romeo is banished, he goes to a place Mantua. वो Mantua चले जाते हैं Verona से. And this this Juliet is left there in Verona and she's upset about everything and upset with the family also because they are forcing her to get married to this person Paris. And ये नहीं चाहती Paris से शादी करना. फिर क्या हो जाता है Paris के, ये क्या करती है, she goes to Fair Lawrence. Fair Lawrence हमने पढ़ा था, was a friend of Romeo, जिन्होंने क्या किया था, इन दोनों की शादी कराई थी चुपचापी में. तो ये क्या करता है, Fair Lawrence के पास जाती है and she tells him that I want to go to Romeo and I cannot get married to this person and if you do not take me to Romeo then I will commit suicide and I will kill myself. मैं अपने आप को मार लूंगी. तो ये करता है. Then Fair Lawrence he becomes वो होता है ना, दयालु बन जाता है, उनको दया आ जाती है. Then he gives her a magic potion. तो उस magic potion से क्या होता है, that if she drinks that magic potion she will die for 42 hours. यहाँ कहीं लिखा है she'll become lifeless for 42 hours, कि वो lifeless हो जाएंगी कितने टाइम के लिए, 42 hours के लिए वो lifeless हो जाएंगी. ठीक है. तो he gives this, Fair Lawrence gives her this potion and everything and she goes home and then she is in the dilemma that whether she should take the potion or not, or whether she should get married to Paris and live here in Verona with her parents and Paris. But then she's decided that her love for Romeo was so strong that she decides that she is going to take the magic potion and be with Romeo. So then what happens, before the night of her marriage, she drinks that magic potions and everybody assumes that she has died and she has passed away. Then Fair Lawrence, what happens, who was a friend of Romeo, as I have told you, he comes to the place, वो आ जाते हैं and then he consoles the parent that this has to happen and जो होना था वो हो गया. And फिर क्या करते हैं, they bury Juliet. ठीक है. एंड व्हाट वाज देयर प्लान, जो ये जूलियट का एंड फेयर लॉरेंस का क्या प्लान था, दैट शी विल ड्रिंक द मैजिक पोशन एंड व्हेन शी विल बिकम लाइफलेस, तो उनको 42 आवर्स तक शी विल बिकम लाइफलेस एंड 42 आवर्स के बाद ये क्या करेंगे, दिस फेयर लॉरेंस विल गो टू हर ग्रेव एंड ही विल डिग द ग्रेव एंड ही विल ब्रिंग जूलियट आउट. तो ये इनका क्या था, दिस वाज द प्लान दे हैड. बट रोमियो डिड नॉट नो अबाउट दैट प्लान. देयर वाज अ सर्वेंट ऑफ रोमियो, he told Romeo that Juliet has passed away. So he was so saddened by the fact that he goes to a shop and asks for the poison. But taking poison was a kind of a crime at that point of time. So he gets the poison, although he gets the poison by the shopkeeper. Then he was like, let me just go to the grave of Juliet for the very last time and see her. So he goes to the grave, but when he is there at the grave, Paris also comes with flowers at the grave of Juliet. पर वहाँ पे वो जब रोमियो को देख लेते हैं and he sees that Romeo is digging the grave and bringing out Juliet from that grave, he becomes angry and he started fighting with Romeo and दोनों की क्या हो जाती है, लड़ाई हो जाती है. And in the fight Romeo tells him that I don't want to fight with you. Tells him that I don't want to fight with you, please do not fight with me. But in the fight what happens, Paris dies by the hands of Romeo and Paris मर जाते हैं. फिर क्या होता है उसके बाद, this Romeo he finds Juliet is still unconscious, she is still dead. फिर इनको क्या लगता है कि जूलियट भी मर चुकी है. सो देयर इज नो पर्पस इन माई लाइफ एंड आई डो नॉट हैव अ रीजन टू लिव. तो ये क्या करता है, ही किल्स हिमसेल्फ एंड एज सून एज ही किल्स हिमसेल्फ व्हाट हैपेंस, जूलियट अवेक्स. जूलियट जिंदा हो जाती है. एंड व्हेन शी फाइंड्स दिस रोमियो इज नो मोर, ही हैज किल्ड हिमसेल्फ, तो क्या होता है, शी आल्सो कमिट्स सुसाइड. तो दोनों के दोनों क्या होते हैं, मर जाते हैं. देन व्हाट हैपेंस, बोथ द कैपुलेट एंड द मॉन्टेग्यू फैमिली दे कम देयर, द प्रिंस आल्सो कम देयर, एंड देन दे डिसाइड कि हमारी वजह से क्या हुआ कि फैमिली की वजह से दो बच्चे जो थे, दो चिल्ड्रन ऑफ द फैमिली, दे हैड टू लूज देयर लाइफ, एंड पेरिस आल्सो लॉस्ट देयर लाइफ, एंड टाइबर्ट आल्सो डाइड, एंड Mauricio, who was a friend of this Romeo, he was also injured. So a lot of mishap happened because of the fight between the families. So they decided that they will resolve their fight and then they will live happily, although the children have died away and they have passed away. So this was the story of the play, that is Romeo and Juliet, right? Let us just quickly revise it. So what is happening? रोमांटिक ट्रेजेडी है. रोमांटिक ट्रेजेडी, आई हैव टोल्ड यू, मॉन्टेग्यूज, कैपुलेट्स आर द टू फैमिलीज, रोमियो एंड जूलियट हैं इसमें. देन रोजलिन से वो पहले प्यार करता है. देन टाइबाल्ट इज द कजिन ऑफ जूलियट. देन फेयर लॉरेंस is a friend with Romeo. Then Mauricio is also a friend with Romeo. Then Paris is the one who is there to marry Juliet, but ultimately what happens in the end, that Romeo and Juliet die. Clear? So this was the summary of the book. Right? So this was today's class. This topic or this play, The Midsummer Night Dream, we would be doing in the next class. Thank you for today.